Today we're unpacking the politics of the day, from the King of the North's coronation to his brewing backbench rebellion. And Liz Truss has brought the Conservative Political Action Committee, CPAC, to Britain with millions of people crowding around outside. Joining me in the studio, the City AM opinion and features editor, Alys Denby. Welcome to the show, Alys.
Thank you for having me.
And Theo Bertram, director at the Social Market Foundation and a former Labour advisor. Welcome to the show, Theo.
Morning, Ed. Thanks very much.
Is this your first time, Theo?
I think it might be.
Are you feeling nervous?
Not yet, but you never know.
We're going to steward you carefully through this high-level discussion. Let's begin with the man of the moment, Andy Burnham. He's promising a new path as he becomes leader of the Labour Party today. He's making a speech in London. What? Shouldn't it be in Manchester? Where he will say that he is unashamedly Labour and he has the courage to fix the big things that politics has neglected. That includes issues like privatisation and the centralising of political power. Theo, always unwise to take a drink just before I turn to you. What is Andy Burnham on about? What does unashamedly Labour mean? Interpret it for us.
I don't know exactly. I can't divine for you precisely what Andy Burnham is going to do in the next 3 years. But I think we've got some idea that what Manchesterism means is he's going to be much more focused on country outside of London. Going to talk about the north a lot. Going to go to the north a lot and live at least part of the time there. And it's also he's also talked about more public control, not public ownership, but public control. So more interventionist economy. And beyond that, I don't think we have that much detail yet. But I think the one other thing he has talked about is taking on social care and council tax. And I think that would be quite a big change in the country.
Yeah, I imagine, Alys, you're not going to give Andy Burnham much quarter there. You're not going to fill in the blanks for Theo and say, no, Theo, you're wrong. Andy Burnham knows exactly what he's going to do. He's clearly worked it all out.
I think unashamedly Labour just means like rehashing this kind of tired narrative of rolling back Thatcherism, right, and taking everything back to the kind of 1970s, nationalising everything, taxing everything, regulating everything to death. That said, look, if he does do something about council tax, this has been a long-standing failing tax in our system. It doesn't work. It's based on ancient valuations with wild distortions. So if he does do something about that, I think he'd have a lot of support, though I think it would end up costing London and the South a lot of money. And if he did take on social care, another like awful failing system in our country. But we saw what happened to Theresa May when she tried to suggest that some people might have to pay a little bit of their own money for their social care. It lost her majority. So it would make him immediately very unpopular, and he won't like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think every time, I kind of yearn for... I think the problems the country faces are so obvious, and I yearn for change. But what you said there about Theresa May was very interesting, because, Theo, it's one thing to identify the problems. It's quite another to get them over the line, to bring your party with you. It's what Keir Starmer himself found. Now, Andy Burnham has a much more deft political touch than Keir Starmer. So does he have a chance of fixing big problems? Because on the one hand, I think he's a better communicator, but on the other hand, I don't think he's very strong.
I disagree with that a little bit. So I think you're right that Keir Starmer allowed himself to be defined by constraint, the things he couldn't do in government, and we all know what those are. And I think Andy Burnham,
as in couldn't raise income tax and that kind of thing.
Well, he was penned in, but not just by those things, but by the Iran war, by the energy prices, Ukraine, all the reasons we know why.
Okay.
Why couldn't the government be more effective? And it was always something beyond his control. Mm-hmm. I don't think Andy Burnham is going to let himself be defined by constraint, but by choice. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to say, there are things that I want to do. That already is quite a big difference. And I think the other story, when I first met Andy Burnham, he was a special advisor, and he was really in the mould of a new Labour apparatchik. He was very handsome, very nice, very friendly, very good communicator, and he rose through the parliamentary ranks, became a cabinet minister. And I think the point where things changed for him, and I don't think this is a secret, is when he went to Anfield to trot out the government line on Hillsborough, and he got booed, he got heckled by the audience, by that group of fans. And I think that really changed his direction. That sort of, I'm going to be the person that does what the line is and sticks to it and sells it. I think it changed at that point, and he became more concerned about being rooted in community, and also about challenging some of the status quo of things in Westminster. I think that is quite a different approach and backstory than what he might have had if he carried on along that sort of classic New Labour line. And I think it's also quite different to where Keir Starmer is. So I think that definition is more than just a bit of talking in a northern accent. I think it is really about who he is and where that change came from.
It's interesting. Oh, Alys.
Well, I just think that there's a risk there that he gets battered about by very vocal and sympathetic campaigners. And Hillsborough, if you would say that that wasn't a terrible thing that happened and that those people needed justice. But what about the WASPy women, who, again, a very vocal campaign group, women of a certain age, very
campaigning against the lowering of the retirement age,
but it's
raising of the retirement age.
But it's a ridiculous campaign because it would cost billions and billions and billions. These people were told that their pension age was changing. It's very difficult to find anybody who actually suffered economically from this, and yet he said that he would stand by these campaigners and then immediately had to roll back on it. So I think it's this thing of him wanting to be liked, which may mean he gets, as I say, easily battered about by whoever's sort of, the loudest.
Well, I was going to take what Theo said about being booed, because the first boo will come from his appointment as Chancellor, because whoever he appoints is going to get booed by the other side. And this strikes me as really, really, really important, because it seems to illustrate that the Labour Party cannot be reconciled between two wings, Theo.
I think the choice of Chancellor is really important. Last week we were told, the media told us it was definitely going to be Ed Miliband, and now it's definitely going to be Shabana Mahmood, and I'm still waiting to see.
Who would you have?
I think you need what are the qualities that you need in a Chancellor, and I think you need someone who will challenge you. You need someone who's competent. You need someone who has their own mind. I think Alistair Darling did a good job standing up to Gordon Brown when he needed to. I think Gordon Brown did a good job in standing up to Tony Blair when he needed to. So I think you need someone that has their own mind and has their own ability to do that. And I think Shabana Mahmood is one of those people. But I also think there are others who probably wouldn't startle the markets, and I think it's notable that we haven't seen big fluctuations in where the bond markets are over the speculation of Chancellor. But I think Pat McFadden is not going to frighten the horses, and is someone who has his own mind.
You're conspicuously not saying Ed Miliband.
I'm not saying Ed Miliband, and it may yet be Ed Miliband, but I do think it's important that he's someone who stood for election once and lost, and I think that is a significant moment, and I'm not sure it's a great idea to bring someone back that the country's already said no to, but I do think he's incredibly capable. I would fudge this in a clever way, which is I would split the Treasury in two. And then I would give...
You had me up to then.
I would give Ed Miliband one part, and I would give someone from the other side of the party the other. And that way you solve both political problems, and you could also put it in Darlington and make it a full department itself.
Yes, I think that would be a recipe for disaster. I was going to say that I'm pro Ed Miliband being Chancellor. Well, and I think actually if you had Ed Miliband and Shabana Mahmood at the top table, Home Secretary and Treasury, he can punch it through. I would respect Burnham if he appointed Miliband as Chancellor.
I think the markets would hate that. They're very concerned about an Ed Miliband chancellorship. It's not a myth. But I think that...
I put Theo in his place, you put me in my place, so it goes on.
I think that I see your argument, because I think you're thinking of a sort of David Cameron, George Osborne model of people who share the same political project and are sort of hand in glove. Yeah. And so I see where you're coming from with that. But I think Ed Miliband would be a terrible chancellor.
Elaborate.
Well, his net zero agenda has pushed up energy costs, which is what's causing inflation. He's bad at economics. And
I think he'd be a kind of whole of government chancellor. He's a very powerful minister. He's better in the tent than out. He has prosecuted his agenda, whether you agree with him or not. And I don't accept the Theo thesis that he stood for election once and lost. I think
he's been a very good Secretary of State in the role that he's in, and I know that there are many people who disagree with the direction that he's set, but he's absolutely been clear, and I don't think that's always been the case with all of the government's ministers. He came in with a plan, and he has stuck to that doggedly, even when people would want him to deviate, and I think that is a really important thing. But I would say above all of this, it is really about what is Andy Burnham's direction for the country. And the Chancellor then needs to fulfil that direction. So I think my other slight worry with with Ed Miliband is, while he's perfectly capable of being Chancellor, I think we will spend a lot of the time then talking about what does Ed Miliband want rather than what does Andy Burnham want. And whereas I think Keir Starmer was more focused on foreign affairs and happy to let Rachel Reeves take the can for what was happening domestically, I think Andy Burnham is going to be much more gripped of what's happening in the country.
And I agree with Theo on Ed Miliband having been rejected by the country. He wasn't just rejected, he was a source of mockery. You can't have a Chancellor being widely mocked when he's taking your money away.
But I think if we just say people can't be politicians because they're widely mocked by, a particular part of the press, then Labour would never be.
I just don't think people will take him seriously.
I think I've just become more and more Ed Miliband because it's so counterintuitive. I know. Anyway, we might talk about it some more. But anyway, Alys, Denby and Theo Bertram are going to stay with me. We're going to talk a bit more about Andy Burnham, for which I do not apologise. He's about to become Labour leader and then Prime Minister. We're going to talk a bit about how he communicates, all of that after the news. I'm still with Alys Denby, the features editor of City AM, and Theo Bertram, the director of the think tank, the Social Market Foundation, who are today's columnists. Now, let's talk about how our new Prime Minister communicates. Andy Burnham, in place of media scrutiny, has decided to do his own press. Many Labour MPs have been praising his Ask Me Anything video that he put on X.
Here I am in the middle of Cardiff.
Mr. Burnham, sir.
How are you? For an in-person Ask Me Anything.
I work in the council. I work with homeless people. The big thing that we're constantly confronted with is basically the crisis in affordable housing.
Yeah.
I've heard you've done a lot of things in Manchester. Do you have a plan?
The simple answer is the biggest council house building programme since the post-war period.
So everyone who asks him anything gets the answer they want, whether it's social care, defending the realm, reviving hospitality, bringing back libraries. Burnham has it all sorted. This is the kind of honeymoon period, Alys, and it is, I know from being a politician myself, it's very, very easy when you're chatting to people to agree with their concerns and say you're going to do something about it without actually having anything specific to say. So it's going to be much more different, isn't it, in 3 months' time when he's actually had to make some decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm quite torn on these TikTok videos because on the one hand I watch them and I think this is utterly trivial. Why is he telling us if he wears socks with sandals and that he puts milk on his tea bag? Insane. And obviously he retains complete editorial control over this, so it's just there's no challenge, there's no scrutiny at all. But on the other hand, you watch them and they are quite bouncy and upbeat, and confidence does really matter. I think it was a real failure of the last government that they came in saying that everything was terrible and gloomy and miserable. And Andy Burnham is obviously projecting a much sunnier picture, and that, I think, is undeniably a good thing. I just think it won't last and it won't face contact with reality.
You mentioned socks and sandals. He did manage to post this video on TikTok, and he was asked about socks and sandals, voice notes and filming gigs.
I have been known to wear my Birkenstocks with socks. I'm not sure I should be admitting that. I am receiving lots of advice from many quarters right now, some of which is in the form of voice notes. I'm against what happened to living in the moment and just absorbing what's right in front of you.
So I film gigs and I wear sliders with socks going up my calves, proper socks, not short socks. So I'm sort of semi-qualified to be Prime Minister, Theo. But it's an interesting point here that Alys was making, which is, Robert Jenrick rose to prominence. He was great on social media, the famous video of him confronting fare dodgers. That kind of works for an up-and-coming MP who wants to make their mark and cut through the noise. Does it work for a Prime Minister? There's an element of statesman-like. Can you go from the Downing Street lectern to a seat sitting in a T-shirt in the square in Cardiff?
You have to, I think, these days. You have to be able to communicate on video. You have to be able to communicate short-form video. There's about 30 million people using TikTok, far more than read and read the newspapers. And so I think you have to be able to communicate where people are. I think one of the things that you can instantly feel about Andy Burnham is he seems to be a person. He sort of feels like a coherent person. There's a character there, there's someone there, and it's also that he seems to enjoy being mayor, and he seems to have enjoyed incredibly this sort of pressure. He's under this leadership contest and he's obviously won. And is he going to be a Prime Minister who enjoys being Prime Minister? Because I think one of the things we look for in our leaders is are they suited to this role? And we pretty quickly tell when a Prime Minister's in that role, are they not suited for this? And one of the things I think we look for is, are they enjoying it? And so I think he might be, a bit like Boris Johnson, Tony Blair. Boris Johnson arguably enjoyed it a bit too much, but I think he might be one of those Prime Ministers that just feels comfortable wearing the crown. And I think that's really important, because then that conveys calmness, that helps you make decisions, and I think it's more than just comms, but I do think it's wrong to wear socks with sandals.
I agree. Though actually, I know I'm told now that if you don't wear socks, you look really millennial, and it's actually hip and Gen Z to wear socks. I read this in the Times all the time.
Thank you. It's incredibly hip. Milk and tea first.
No.
Yeah, that was bad.
That's awful.
Playing things loudly on public transport. And who can be in favour of that?
No, nobody's
I'm not even
in
going to ask you that question, but more thoughtfully, Yorkshire pudding on Christmas dinner. What?
No.
I think you can have Yorkshire pudding with anything in my book. It's such a good thing, a Yorkshire pudding. I'd have any opportunity to put a Yorkshire pudding on a plate.
That is true, actually. You win that one. Right, let's talk about some serious policies. Social care. Andy Burnham has said if there's one area where I'm going to expend quite a lot of political capital, it'll be that. Alys, you were pointing out earlier that Theresa May came very unstuck, and I thought that again was a very fascinating moment in politics, because I was really up for it. So she went into the 2017 election. I really thought at that point Theresa May was kind of the new Iron Lady. I thought she was going to absolutely walk that election, get a massive majority. I could take myself inside the thinking of the Tory policy wonk, saying if we're ever going to get away with putting an unpopular policy in a manifesto, it's social care. It's actually a very sensible policy. But is this has Andy Burnham laid a booby trap? Because you can't make anyone happy on social care, because the only way you can solve it is getting them to pay more.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. The only way you can solve this is by people having to pay more out of their own estates or from their houses, and that will be very bad luck for people who are very ill for a long time. But there's no other way you can do it. It can't be like the NHS. It's that we just can't afford it. So people who can afford to pay for it themselves are going to have to, and that'll never make you popular.
It's always it's a nut that's extremely difficult to crack. Theo, you run a think tank. I mean,
I'm excited about this. I love this.
By the way, this is a classic policy wonks answer.
The policy wonks, all of them across all of the different parties, they all love this. But the thing about social care is you can't fix social care without fixing council tax, because the reason why council tax is so bad is because we spend so much, about 60% of what we spend goes on adult social care. People think council tax is going to pay for the bins. Why is my street not being cleared? It's because all of the money goes on social care. And so what you've got to do is fix both at the same time, which is an absolutely mad thing to do. Because if you think how insanely politically difficult it is to fix social care, which killed off Theresa May, well, council tax killed off Margaret Thatcher with the poll tax rise. So the idea that you're going to do both at once, I am absolutely 100% behind. And I think it's actually the key to unlocking it, because people hate council tax more than anything in this country. And if you say to people, we're going to increase council tax in order to, before you've even said anything about how much or what for, that's it, I'm not voting for you ever again. Right. But if you say we can get rid of council tax, we're going to change it hugely, and we're going to have a dedicated social care funding, and we're going to do this on social care, because at the moment we've got 1 in 7 chance that you're going to lose everything you ever saved, or your home, everything else, because it's just a lottery when we get to old age. None of us know whether we're going to be on the good side or the bad side. And so don't we need a system that changes that? And people agree with that. So I think if you do both together, there is actually a political way through. And I think he is thinking about that.
Well, that is very interesting. But, I mean, the trouble with that argument, Theo, is that it still has to be paid for, whichever pot it comes out of. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about a wealth tax. Andy Burnham has said he's going to stick to the manifesto, but there's still a little wiggle room on tax. Alys, Denby, I can't imagine you think a wealth tax is a sensible way forward.
No, wealth taxes don't work. You both drive away wealthy people, and therefore you don't get the tax from them, but you also disincentivise investment. So, I mean, they don't work. They've been tried in lots of different countries and always failed. If he wants to do something more like a kind of asset tax, which is the sort of thing that Gary Stevenson likes to talk about, is very, very
Gary Stevenson is this sort of
fake economist. Sorry. But that's also very difficult to do because it's very difficult to determine what people's assets are.
Yes.
There's no list somewhere of everything that rich people own. So both difficult to do, ineffective, and a bad idea. It's essentially just confiscatory. It's just looking at people who have stuff and saying, I'm going to take it.
I mean, this goes, doesn't it, Theo? There's so much to unpack here. Back to your earlier point, fixed social care and council tax, but you still have to pay for social care. Then you have Pat McFadden, the welfare secretary, leaked texts. They happened to be to Peter Manson, saying that all Labour MPs just queue up to say, how can we tax more? And this is a vibe tax, as they say, where it's just, it's a Labour government, yet more taxes.
Yeah, so I think whenever people say wealth tax, I always want to know, well, what exactly do you mean? What is it you're going to tax? How often? And I think lots of people advocating for wealth tax are really still just making those same old socialist worker arguments of tax the rich without actually going into any more detail on that. Now, I think what can Andy Burnham, what might he do in this space? So I think one thing that is being talked about is, do you increase capital gains tax by some amount? And so that's possible. We won't find that out to the budget. He's not going to come in and then announce that he's doing that next week. It would be something that you would do in the budget. But I think one of the changes that you can make is to shift from council tax to something closer to a land value tax. Now that you could see that as a wealth tax, because then you're sort of actually starting, instead of us paying council tax in a really random way, that someone in a small house in the north could pay more council tax than someone in a big house in a wealthy area in the south. Actually, you can shift it so that it's more progressive. So I think that could be seen as a wealth tax in some way. So I think what we need to hear and see is actual, clear, concrete proposals. And I don't think we're going to hear that next week. I think that will all be pushed towards the budget.
Yeah, I agree on land tax. I think it's even something that the Centre for Policy Studies, where I used to work, has proposed, which is a right-wing think tank. So it's something that has support across the political spectrum. You're right, if Andy Burnham just wants to frame that as a wealth tax, fine, that's a comms strategy.
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate about a land value tax, and Dan Needle from Tax Policy Associates, who's one of the most interesting people who writes about tax, said unequivocally that a land value tax is a very sensible idea, and then unequivocally said it's almost impossible to implement politically. And again, a lot of these changes, Dan Needle's answer was you have to implement it almost over a kind of 30 or 40 year period, because every time you change a tax, there will be losers, and it's the losers who you will hear from. You also have to get growth. And Alys, in your column for City AM, you've been writing about how London needs space and attention for more development, basically more skyscrapers.
We definitely need more. Sorry, this was a column in CapX. I don't want to.
Oh, sorry, CapX.
Yeah, well, no, look, this was actually the City of London, which is it's a sort of devolved government for the city, and it's quite interesting because businesses have voting rights. So it's sort of run for in the interest of profit rather than in the interest of politics. Anyway, it's a growing region. It's responsible for something like 11% of GVA, a very successful part of London, and it's come up with its own plan for development, for creating new offices, which will create new jobs, bring investment. It's been coming up with this plan for years. It's been doing loads of consultation, and out of the blue, Minister Matthew Pennycook has come in and paused this plan and said, no, you cannot build these skyscrapers. You need to look at the complaints of Heritage England, which say it's going to encroach on the Tower of London. Look, I love the Tower of London. I wouldn't want to do anything to the Tower of London. But
some of your best friends are the Tower of London.
My best friends but it's literally a square mile. Like, what do you talk about encroachment? Like, there are already tall buildings really nearby. And I just think for a government that talks about wanting growth and also loving devolution, coming in and getting in the way of a devolved administration that is successfully producing growth with clear results doesn't seem like the right way to go to me.
Theo, you're nodding.
Yeah,
is that simply to acknowledge that Alys is talking, or because you agree with her?
We need growth, and the government. I mean, Keir Starmer said that means we need to get planning reform out of the way, get things built, and I agree. We've got to stop NIMBYism, and we've got to build more stuff. We need to not just build it in London; we need to build it in the rest of the country as well. We think we're doing some work on what Mark Carney's doing in Canada, where he has got growth, and I think the key thing there there is you have a relatively small number of projects, maybe 20 projects, and then you put the full weight of the Prime Minister and everyone else behind it, and you just use the fear and the strength of government to push everyone else in the way and attract investment in and get stuff built. So we need that to happen, and we need it particularly outside of London, and I think hopefully that's what he will do.
I mean, I 100% agree. I mean, that's why I'm slightly obsessed by HS2, which was kind of over-engineered. But I think the whole levelling up argument is completely absurd, because what you say in your column, Alys, is absolutely right. London is the money engine, the growth engine for the whole of the UK. And if you want to level up the UK, you connect them to London. If you get to Liverpool in an hour and a half or Manchester in an hour and 20 minutes, it makes a huge difference rather than uprooting. The one bit where you're wrong, Alys, we're going to take a slight segue here because of my obsession with heritage, is I do not favour development for development's sake. The Tower of London is an incredibly important heritage asset.
I agree.
One of the things I would...
But we're not proposing to knock it down,
I would die for, Theo. One of the things I'm going to die for is the view you get from Richmond Park to St Paul's Cathedral, which has been is a protected view, which I fought for when I was a minister. I don't want your skyscrapers around. Put them in Canary Wharf.
People love skyscrapers. We have cute nicknames for them. We love them. And also, look, if you've been to the City of London, it is an amazing place for heritage. It's got Roman ruins, it's got skyscrapers, it's got St Paul's Cathedral. It's that blend that makes it such an exciting and incredible place to work, and why it is the global financial hub that it is. And I completely agree with you about London, about this kind of levelling up idea. Look, the policies that work for London will work for elsewhere in the country too. You know, for Aberdeen, it's getting out of the way of the oil and gas industry. For Manchester, it was attracting foreign direct investment into football. The policies that help London grow can help the rest of the country grow too. You just need to get out of the way. Yeah.
You're here, Alys, which means you're not at the Conservative Political Action Conference. You're missing people like Liz Truss, Nigel Farage, Lucy Connolly. I'm not sure who Lucy Connolly is.
She did that. She went to prison for that tweet.
Oh, yes, sorry. It's organised by the American Conservative Union. It's based on a similar event in the States. It's billed as charting a course for a prosperous, sovereign future. I don't particularly like the cut of its jib. Am I wrong?
I was there yesterday, and I have to say it was about as well attended as a paedophile's funeral. Are
you allowed to say that? Do I apologise to Ofcom at this point? Carry on.
It's not a swear word, is it?
Carry on.
No, there was hardly anybody there, hardly any journalists, very few people, a really sort of dead atmosphere, a few kind of weird influences, someone called Angloid I've never heard of, Jacob Rees-Mogg sort of trotting out tired Brexit talking points, Suella Braverman asking if anybody was a member of the Wokarati, and I was kind of tempted to put up my hand. No, look, this is not the future of the right. This is trying to import sort of MAGA politics into Britain, and the worst thing about it, that we should never bring over from America, is that there was no bar.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Alcohol free. I mean, it's easy to mock, and we could have mocked Nigel Farage. He could be Prime Minister by 2029. Jeremy Corbyn was a fringe figure, ended up leading the Labour Party. I guess this is the first CPAC. In 3 years' time, Theo, there could be 10,000 people at Wembley Arena.
Quite possibly, maybe, but I think any organisation that appears to be led by Liz Truss is going to have a very limited shelf life in this country, possibly even shorter than a lettuce.
These people tend to come back into fashion. It's a surprising thing.
This didn't feel like it had a future, I have to say.
One of the things, obviously, that I enjoyed reading yesterday, because I worked there, is the announcement of new peerages. Keir Starmer said that he was going to reform the House of Lords. He wasn't going to give resignation honours. Admittedly, this is a political peerage list. A resignation honours would include things like knighthoods, CBs, OBs. There were some quirky appointments. Marcus Davey, who's a friend of mine who ran an arts centre in North London called the Roundhouse, ran it for 27 years. I wouldn't have put him in the political box. Turns up as a Labour peer, which I'm delighted to see him there. What did the peerage list say to you, Theo?
I thought it was quite a good set of peers across all of the parties, actually. There wasn't anyone that you were sort of like, oh, well, they're there because they've just spent a load of money. It didn't genuinely seem like these are people who had some experience in some part of British social or economic life that could actually be quite helpful in the Lords. I think more broadly, the idea of House of Lords reform is one of those things that people always talk about. It's such a pain to do.
Such a
and I'm sort of, you've got so much else to do. And then there are times when actually having the House of Lords, or at least having that second chamber that isn't swapping prime ministers every 10 minutes, is not a terrible thing either. So I'm not sure I'd put House of Lords reform at the top of my to-do list just because it absorbs everything else. And so I think we're stuck with this process of every so often Prime Minister wants to put some more of their party in the House of Lords to try and even up the numbers again.
I was surprised to see the Lib Dems got more peers than the Conservatives. We're bigger than the Lib Dems. They got 5, we got 3. I was pleased that David Ross, the founder of the founder of the Carphone Warehouse, got a peerage. And it's actually the first business person that Kemi Badenoch, I think, has appointed. She tends to appoint people who are sort of part of the culture fight.
Yeah, I'd certainly pleased to see more businessmen in the Lords. We need more business expertise in government generally. I agree with you. I mean, I think Lords reform is a sort of bit of a canard, but you do want it to be a house of proper experts and not just a sort of reward for having sat on the green benches, or like with Sadiq Khan being not a very good mayor.
Yeah, I think Sadiq Khan has earned a position in the Lords, and not least because he's put up with such sort of brickbats, not just from the right in this country, but from Donald Trump as well. So I think I was quite pleased to see Sadiq Khan get a peerage.
So there's a parliamentary reading list has been published, and it's self-selecting. Busybody peers and MPs who want to show off send in their reading lists, what they're reading. I was quite interested to see Johnny Reynolds, who may be the business secretary, reading Jeremy Hunt's book on how to fix Britain. Theo, you're a policy wonk. You must be reading something.
Yeah, I looked at the list, actually.
I bet it's a bit nerdy.
Yeah, there's a really good book on there's a work of sort of fiction, but London Falling. I don't know if you've read that.
I've read amazing reviews about this.
I really would. I mean, it feels like a thriller,
yeah.
But actually, it's the true life of the unfortunate death of a young man called Zach Bretler and his involvement in the shady underworld of London. And while I was reading it, I was listening, and just to be clear, it's completely unconnected, but I was listening to the whole story about this Bitcoin empire that's funding Nigel Farage and all of that, and listening to those two things about sort of this other world that's in London and this access to money and where rules are bent, that's what struck me. The other book in the list that I really recommend, which is a bit more wonky, is a book called Statecraft, which is about how modern wars are being fought by a guy called, I think, Jack Watling, and I would really recommend that as well. Like what's actually happening in drone warfare, what's happening. And it's a very readable book as well, and very accessible. And then the last thing I would say, as part of the Union of Think Tank Bosses, is I also hope that MPs take away a think tank report to read over the summer as well.
I completely disagree. It's your summer reading. You should just be reading fiction. These MPs pretending that they're reading these huge policy tomes, I think they're just showing off. I have much more respect for the ones who say, Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst. I think when you're on the beach, you want to read something that you're going to enjoy and make sure you're actually going to read it. Take a Flashman, take a Jilly Cooper, take something more highbrow if that's your thing, but make it fun.
I agree with that, but I think you can do both. The pamphlets are only short.
Yes, think tank report you can manage. Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, it's very important to make an announcement, which is that I've won the columnist this week. Based on the text coming in, Maria says, Ed is right. Skyscrapers are an abomination.
NIMBYism.
And how's this from Jonathan? Talk about a turnaround. Listen to this. Your ever-increasing, left-leaning, wishy-washy Lib Dem views regularly tempt me to mock you. He means me.
He's talking about me.
Me. However, hearing that you were involved in protecting the amazing view of St Paul's from Richmond Park has raised you up in my expectations. It is a wonderful view, which I never pass without pausing to admire. Well done, Ed. Fist pumps all round.
I normally have so much respect for Times Radio listeners, but you're letting me down.
I'm very chuffed about that. Theo Bertram, think tank boss, head of the Social Market Foundation. Alys Denby, features editor of City AM. Thank you both so much for coming on and talking to us all about the news of the day. This is Ed Vaizey on Times Radio.